Here we have two giant global companies, Cisco and Ford. I mean, we have people, but I'll introduce those in 1 second. And what we're really talking about is, in this Techonomic age, how does strategy and structure of the organization at the corporate, large global corporate scale change? How do we think differently about it? How do companies think differently about themselves? And I think you're going to find that both Ford and Cisco are doing quite surprising things about responding to the changed environment in ways that aren't entirely expected. So quickly to introduce them both, Padmasree Warrior, the CTO of Cisco, and someone that everyone here probably knows quite well, with 1.4 million Twitter followers, although the reason I don't have the iPad with me for this session is that Twitter has been down for 2 hours.
And I didn't do it.
So she probably crashed it with her 1.4 million followers. Venkatesh Prasad, who goes by Prasad, what's your exact title at Ford?
Senior Technical Leader.
Senior Technical Leader. So I think I want to start with you, Prasad. As you're deeply involved in the product, kind of conceptualizing where Ford's product is going.
Right.
Can you just talk a little bit about how you think about that? Because it isn't sort of like, what color should we change the car to next season anymore, right?
Correct. So let me take a few steps back and then leap forward, if you will. So I was reading your book, excerpts from your book on my way here, and I was sort of reflecting on 107 years ago, the Model T and the Model T effect, if you will. What it had the effect it had on people and on society, and really on transforming, in many aspects, the techonomic landscape of the early 20th century. And so with that backdrop in mind, I'd like to fast forward to today and then offer the car as a platform really to bring people in society together in different ways, and then sort of lay out what the techonomic opportunity or the techonomic greenfield is today, and what there is for us, in fact, to till, if you will, with the tools of today. And so if you sort of look at this and look at the macroeconomics of the automobile in general, and where Ford is playing quite actively, it's really looking at the 500 million commute hours we have today in the US alone, and you could multiply that by 4 for the total of
500 million commuter hours per day.
I'm sorry, per week.
Per week, sorry.
I should restate that, per week. So 100 million commuter hours per day, or 4 times that if you want a global number. And then you look at what we do and what technologies do for us in that duration. There's not a whole lot that works for us from the standpoint of the internet. It essentially comes to a grinding halt when we get moving. And one thing really interesting about the automobile is that when we get into an automobile to go from A to B, we're either doing that to earn money or to spend money. So there couldn't be a better techonomic rationale to look more deeply at how to, in some sense, tune the internet to work at driving speeds. And this is not about getting the driver to do more. It's simply about getting more done during the journey, right? Whether it's for the driver or for the passengers. So I think that's really the techonomic driver of today, and really saying, how can we repurpose and retool and, in some sense, adapt what we know so much about the internet today, and get it to work for us when the world moves. And so you have 1 billion cars and trucks and buses on the planet today. The next billion is being rapidly built. And if you look at the next billion as platforms, those then open up just a whole set of opportunities, economic opportunities, for a whole wide spectrum of value for all of us around here. So I think that's the backdrop I would like to offer.
So you want to think of the vehicle as a platform.
Right.
And so then what are the apps? Give us an example of an app on that platform.
So there's a whole broad spectrum of apps, as I said. So let's start from perhaps apps that make the driver place a phone call, as simple as placing a phone call. So voice activating a contact's phone number that's sitting in your phone, and being able to place a phone call, or perhaps being able to receive a text message but coming through through a text through voice presentation, so it really comes through as a voice.
Those are basically happening now, right?
That's happening right now. So you might say, well, that's basic, right? The other aspect is then you can sort of get into a whole spectrum of things. And so you might say, well, what's in it for me individually? What's the internet doing for me? So an example that might be, perhaps you need to make changes in your home. This is purely at the consumer level. So you're looking for ways to best modify your house, or maybe take a vacation a month from now. And these are questions that are really in your mind. What you could get is really radio stations that are tuned to this. So this is really still using, in some sense, the 20th century comfort from a user interface standpoint, but then offering you completely different content where mashups of data happen and really bring you just what you need. So this is really, again, more or less in the infotainment area where information is being provided to you and customized to you. You can then progress further and say, well, it's maybe patients like me. It's people. I know someone who's not well, or maybe it's me, and I need custom information just about me. Can you serve that to me? So these are things that really begin now appearing like things that you're used to when you're stationary, when you're at 0 miles an hour. So I like to call this the last inch opportunity or the last inch challenge, but at 70 miles an hour or at speeds, right? So how can you really retune the internet so it works for you, so it works at driving speeds? How can you solve the last inch challenge at 70 miles an hour? How can you start doing things? And you might be willing to pay a special fee for that service that gets you information just about you or your family or your home or your vacation, tuned to you just in time. So that's just pure content. But you can look at the vehicle as a whole as really being a generator of data, whether it's the brake system wanting to speak to the chassis system and wanting to speak to you, or speak to other cars, or speak to the infrastructure. We've heard a lot about things happening. But I think what's really exciting is when you make and define automobiles as platforms, you get some very interesting mashups, just like you've noticed in the internet at 0 miles an hour experience. So I think that's what it is. Then you can get into really managing congestion in megacities. You can look at the automobile as just what it is, which is a component in a much larger system of systems, all the way from other transportation components to the biophysical system, to the atmospheric physics system. And then you can look at automobiles as sensors, right, in a much larger planetary complex system, if you will, and start repurposing that data that you get from the vehicle and the data that you can get from elsewhere. So it's the automobiles now acting as servers of data, acting as consumers of data, where humans actually mediate this data in very interesting ways to create information that's truly of value.
Does Ford take the view that over time, those pieces of the functionality might become as important or even potentially more important than the sort of current marketing-driven physical shape of the vehicle kind of issues, or will those continue to be equally important?
Well, they'll certainly be very, very important. And I think Brian made a really good point yesterday when he was speaking about this other neural system, this sort of the cyber neural system that's taking effect. And so I think while you do have the physical system at work and the physical complex systems that we observe and feel and experience, there's clearly the world of the unseen, the world that we're so used to really, and getting used to in our 0 miles per hour experience at our desktop, and perhaps walking at 2 miles using our smartphone, 2 miles an hour, or in our offices. So we are used to that other world that's operating, the world of networking, the world of data being transferred. But now I think these two will begin to play in very interesting manners, and that's where the notion of an automobile as a platform comes to reality.
Okay. So, Padma, I think most people in this audience know Cisco is very aggressively trying to move into new markets and has been doing a pretty darn good job of it. Just an amazing article about how your company has played a huge role in transforming the new stadium in the Meadowlands to give a fundamentally different experience to the football fan, where they're actually going to have better television in the stadium than they could possibly get at home, and all kinds of interactive stuff. So there's a lot of things you could probably say that are somewhat parallel to the kind of things Prasad's saying about Ford. And we can touch on that, but I'm more interested in the way that Cisco has felt it necessary, or John, your boss, John Chambers, to really fundamentally structure the company in a different way because of this need to keep growing and to pursue these changing opportunities. And just to warn you, Prasad, I want to come back and find out how, after we hear from Padma, how these new ideas that you have and that Ford is pursuing changes the way the company has to organize itself. So how is Cisco organizing itself differently to grow in this era of innovation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think, as you said, most people kind of have one view of Cisco from the outside. I'm actually fairly new to Cisco. I joined the company about 2.5 years ago. I would say there are 3 unique characteristics about the company that allows us to retool the company, to retool the marketplace and the transitions that we see. It's about 25 years old. Last year, we celebrated our 25th anniversary. So I would say it's a company that's gone through the adolescence and is positioned to have scale and that allows us to grow. It's a company that's made up of 140 acquisitions, right? So we jokingly say we have 250 CEOs in the company. So it's very entrepreneurial for a big company that's comfortable with taking risks. And it's a company that's seen some very severe down cycles. In the last dot-com bust, Cisco was close to death and kind of came back out of it. So I think because of all those factors, it makes a company very uniquely focused about market transitions. What's happening in the market? What do we expect to see in the market in the next decade or so? And how do we position ourselves, right? So with that, if we sort of kind of think about that as the culture of the company, there's two big transformations we see going on a global basis. The first, I think, is something that we've all talked about for the last day and a half or so. It's this notion about the internet no longer just being an information superhighway. It's really becoming a platform to transform many industries, right? Transportation, healthcare, education. And so that means we as a company have to now understand these verticals at a much more deeper level than we have in the past, which we basically provided connectivity as a company. The second, going with that, speaking of retooling the internet, we kind of feel we are in the second phase of the internet now. We kind of went from the web, where it's now much more social, much more real-time, much more media-rich. That's all happening now. And the third phase, which we are beginning to see, is what we call the industrialization of the internet. So we kind of went from the fixed internet to the mobile internet to what we call the industrial internet, where there'll be many multiple sensors, right? Smart grid, if you think about it, is all about having multiple sensors to make energy distribution very different. And so if you kind of say, okay, those are the
which affects every industry.
Which affects every industry and which affects us as a company.
Well, it's a good opportunity for you because there's more data passing through the pipes, right?
Right, but we have to understand how to analyze data that's not just huge bandwidth, but actually very frequent data, but low bandwidth data that comes from these sensors. So it's a different focus that we have to develop. So our company, John Chambers' view is that if we are talking about social networks and the power of connecting experts wherever they are, we should do that inside the company. So we are as an organization organized functionally, but the way leadership and everyone in the company is held accountable to is to bring us together, and it really doesn't matter what your level is in the organization. It's sort of this expert organization. For example, if cloud computing is something that we believe is fundamentally going to change compute architecture, I was asked to lead that, but my charter was pull the experts in the company wherever they are. And we use many of the social tools within the company, as well as Twitter. The reason I'm on Twitter is, for me, it's a digital water cooler. It allows me to eavesdrop on conversations that are going on, as well as participate in these conversations.
Inside the company as well.
And inside as well as outside. So that's one thing we fundamentally believe is in changing ourselves to really becoming a organization that connects experts within the company and outside the company.
What do you call these groups like this cloud computing group? What's the
There is various names. We call them working groups. From a working group, once it gets formalized, it becomes a board. A board is something that's going after about $1 billion growth opportunity for us.
So the cloud is a board now?
Cloud is a board now, and then you graduate to become a council, which is a $10 billion opportunity. So enterprise market segment is a council for us.
So this council for cloud is responsible and tasked with getting $1 billion in revenue per year by how soon? 5
years, or we have a business plan.
And it's not going to go away until you either totally sink or swim on that.
Right, or you get new players, right? Many executives actually. It's a very big change if you think about it, from going, I have my budget, I have my team, leave me a note and come back a year later and I'll tell you what I did, to where I'm now accountable on a regular basis to many of my peers. And so it's a cultural change in leadership, and some people adjusted and some don't, and those don't adjust actually left Cisco, and we've had the transformation we had to go through. But the second thing is that's unique about the company is, perhaps because of the near-death experience that we've had, we now realize that in future, for us to really be successful, we have to be really good at innovation and operational excellence. And the old model used to be you did one or the other. You were a very innovative company and you didn't really have process, and by the way, process gets in the way of innovation, or you're a very process-driven big company and you're very bureaucratic and therefore you can't innovate. And we believe you have to be able to do both. And I think that's something that actually drives how we organize ourselves and how we do it. We're very acquisitive as a company. We continue to buy companies. We love startups, as opposed to many large companies that feel startups are a threat.
But in a way,